So
absolutely.
that's really the root of it. It's like, I need to survive. But if the boss gets mad at us, are we going to die? That's what happens with the anxiety. It makes things bigger than they are. And I think we need to. I think it's designed that way to keep us on guard and keep us safe. If we didn't have any anxiety at all, we would be
Yeah.
getting into lots of trouble.
Well, yeah, evolutionarily, let's say in our evolution, we did go through probably hundreds of thousands of years or maybe millions where we were prey to these big cats or crocodiles or something. And so our system developed these defenses and totally appropriate. But now, we sit in traffic and we stew in these hormones and stress hormones and neurotransmitters, and that doesn't do us much good.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions. I'm Debra Maldonado,
And I'm Dr. Rob.
and we are here to continue our series on emotions. And today we're talking about anxiety and surprise and the illusion of control. Very excited for today. Before we begin, though, I do want to remind you, if you are listening to us on any of the podcast services, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And if you are listening to us on or watching us on YouTube, click the link in the corner and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And
Yeah,
that helps us a lot reach more people. So thank you for that.
appreciate it. Yeah. Um,
I'm a little
uh,
anxious about this episode, Rob. I hope it turns out okay.
oh, you're preaching to the choir. I come from a long line of anxious people, but if I can manage it, anyone can.
Hmm.
That's really the message. And we're not really talking about anxiety disorders here. We're just talking about natural, common, everyday anxiety. Tests, interviews, speaking, that kind of stuff.
World problems.
Yeah, the world going down in flames, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah, so statistically, almost 20% of the population of adults will have experienced some anxiety in a year, meaning
Wow.
that's a huge number of people, right?
And
A
that's in the
lot.
US.
Yeah, in the US, according to NIH.
Mm.
Uh, that's a significant number of people that are experiencing anxiety, right? So, right off the bat, we can say it's part of the human condition to experience anxiety,
Mhm.
right? So you might as well get comfortable with it.
And this
But
would be the research says anxiety disorders. So this isn't like I would say that the people that experience just anxiety in general, I would think is much higher every year.
good point. Yes, good point. But people, yeah, they typically don't do research just on mild anxiety because they figure everybody has that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so chronic anxiety can impair focus, memory. It can impact memory, decision making, and essential functions for leaders and for everyday living, of course. Meaning there's probably millions of people hiding out in their home, not doing what they're capable of doing because of anxiety. And that is the real tragedy, the real human cost of not having the tools to work with our mind, to regulate anxiety, to manage it, to even use it, in a creative way, which we'll talk about as we go
And
along.
some people suppress it. So they're not even aware they're anxious and they kind of stuff it
Yeah.
and they're maybe acting in a hurried way to like it's almost like they're running away from their own anxiety. So they get into overworking, burning out, overwhelm at work or in if they're a business owner, it's getting stressed about their business and
Ooh,
getting busy, busy, busy. So
you know that
it
one.
almost like burns off the anxiety. They think it's burning off the anxiety, but it's actually fueling it. So and then I love this what you just said about focus and decision making. That is so important for any person in their life to make the right decisions. And if you're being led by the emotion and being led by the fear, you'll end up not making the best decisions for yourself. So let's
Absolutely.
talk about, Rob, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the brain and what's really happening in the brain when we have anxiety.
Yeah, so The amygdala, our friend the amygdala, is part of the limbic system, meaning part of the emotional brain, and it's really sensitive to reading situations, facial expressions, body language, stuff that you're not even really conscious about, and picking up on if is this dangerous for me? Is this threatening for me somehow, or am I okay? And it picks it up in split seconds and then activates the whole central nervous system to respond appropriately, which is the fight or flight or freeze response. And these things, if you're not aware of them, they can run your life basically, because if it's oversensitive from early childhood experiences or just from your own physiology, then you're in trouble. You're always
Mhm.
having this overreaction of anxiety to mild stimuli.
And so what you're saying is that this process of anxiety, is really to serve us for survival purposes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really the root of it. It's like I need to survive. But if the boss gets mad at us, are we going to die? That's what happens with the anxiety. It makes things bigger than they are. And I think we need to. I think it's designed that way to keep us on guard and keep us safe. If we didn't have any
Yeah.
anxiety at all, we would be
Yeah.
getting into lots of trouble.
Well, yeah, evolutionarily, let's say in our evolution, we did go through probably hundreds of thousands of years or maybe millions where we were prey to these big cats or crocodiles or
Mhm.
something. And so our system developed these defenses and totally appropriate. But now, we sit in traffic and we stew in these hormones and stress hormones and
Mm.
neurotransmitters, and that doesn't do us much good.
I
So,
remember you and I were driving back from, my mom's and, the highway closed down. There was,
yeah,
like, a big accident in the highway, and we're just dead stop for at least an hour, and I was having a little anxiety, like, I wanna move, I wanna get home. Everything was just stopped, and there was nowhere to go, and I remember getting my mind thinking, "This is temporary. There'll be a time when I'm sitting home comfortably," and I just kept visualizing myself home comfortably. It's going to pass, and it really helped because if you just feed those thoughts and those emotions, you're going to drive yourself nuts. And
yeah,
it's not gonna it won't be nothing's going to change, and it's like almost worrying about something or being stressed about something that is going to be over eventually. It's like making
yes.
everything worse.
Luckily, luckily for us, the nervous system operates in that yin yang balance, right? The
Mhm.
parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, they're always kind of trying to balance each other out. But neurologically, the prefrontal cortex is kind of the captain in the chair at the controls. And the more you develop this awareness, the more you can start to activate the prefrontal cortex and override the fear response so that you're not panicking at the, you know, idea of getting up to speak in front of your colleagues or something like
Yeah.
that. You can manage it.
Now, speaking of public speaking, and the next point we were going to make about the research is that mild anxiety may actually help us to have it. Like it's not bad to have a little bit of anxiety. And I remember someone told me once that I was getting when I first started putting myself out there, and I was nervous about speaking. The coach I had at the time was a speaking coach, and she said, "You want to be nervous." She said, "If you don't have any nerves, your performance is going to be flat, so you wanna channel that energy. So it's okay to have a little bit of that, but you don't want it like, I guess it's a point of, no return. You don't wanna go overboard and to the
Yeah.
urgency anxiety where you really can't perform, so you wanted that delicate balance. But also it helps us be prepared for things, like if we're alwa
Yeah.
like a little bit anticipatory about things like maybe market conditions or even raising your kids, like being a little careful and worrying about, like, how that child's going to be safe in the world or, you're not leaving, like, plugs open and they could stick their finger in. Like, those kind of things are good for us to make sure that there's, like, some level of safety around us, and it helps
Yeah.
us think faster too, it says.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need that because it It's a motivator, right? It's like a little bit of pressure, like people say, right? I work better under pressure.
Mm.
There's something about pressure, right, that brings out the best in you, or it can
Mm.
bring out the best in you. It only becomes a problem when it's chronic, when the anxiety is always there to where you get exhausted after a
Mhm.
while, right? You're just so worried and rerunning the film in your head over and over that you get exhausted, and then you're not able to think creatively.
And our mind is designed to always predict the future so that we don't so we know what's coming up as a protective mechanism, and that's good to have. It's good to have anticipating what another person's going to say so we could be socially acceptable in the group and all those things. But I think what happens when it gets extreme is this idea of control. And
Yeah.
that we feel like if I worry, I remember people telling me, my clients would say, I'm
Mhm.
worried about something. If I don't worry about it and if I just let it go, something bad, even worse is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's this illusion that we have that we can control
With our
something that
thoughts.
happens, that we're we have any power.
Yeah, the old running joke, we had in grad school was, "Don't worry, nothing is under control." Yeah, and that kinda levels the field, right? We don't really have that much control over our external circumstances, but the brain, because it's always anticipating and trying to predict what's going to happen, it feels like some kind of control. That
Mm,
if I'm predicting, right, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm going through the worst case scenarios and the best case scenario, then there's some kind of control there. There's some research, for example, that where airline pilots, if they go through a turbulent storm and they're flying, they're okay, right? Because they're in control. But if they're passengers, their anxiety spikes because they're not in control, right?
mhm.
They're trusting in somebody else flying the plane. So that sense of control is important to us, but it is illusory.
Well, let me just counter that too. We talk about the mind and consciousness and that your mind creates, of course, we're not going to change the planet with just one little mind, but we can change some things in our life by our attitude and where our mind is focused on.
Honestly.
So if our mind is focused on the worst case scenario, maybe the thought itself might not have like this energetic power to bring in or attract like a negative thing, but it's more that we have that thought and then everything we do is following that thought, like our behavior and our emotions and the decisions we make come from the worst case scenario versus someone who's thinking in the best case scenario, they tend to take action and take risks and actually see possibilities where a person who's thinking of how can I not like playing to lose versus playing to win, basically. Playing not to lose is the difference. So what would you say about that? We do have a little bit of control somehow.
Yeah, so this is where we go beyond neurology or
Mhm.
neuroscience, and we get into the mind. Here's let's say, an oversimplified definition. We can think of the brain, the neurological brain, as the hardware, like a
Mhm.
computer has hardware, and the mind as the software that is run on that computer. Now, obviously, we're not machines. We don't know exactly what we are at this point, but we're not machines, right? We have a distinct human nature. But the mind is like it's a different world when you enter the mind now because you're not necessarily talking about physicality. Now you're talking about mindset. How do you
Mhm.
perceive reality? How do you define reality? What is your worldview? And what are the parameters of that worldview that you are imagining in your mind? Because is imagined in your mind.
Mhm. And so you can imagine a person who is more aware that they're not just the body, that they're not this little cork bobbing on the ocean being tossed by the waves of life, that we're actually the ocean. Having that understanding, that philosophical understanding and grounding, you will approach events in life and circumstances much differently than you would from someone who thinks that they have to control everything and there's danger out there, and then they'll tend to be more anxious. So it's not like you have to practice being less anxious, but the higher knowledge helps you. It's almost like the anxious has nowhere to go if you understand. what you're operating in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because in the mind, then we can be observers of our own behavior, of our own reaction, let's say of our
Mhm.
own anxious behavior and reaction to circumstances. That observation, that witnessing our own mind is very powerful. I mean, if you think about what are these monks that sit in meditation for years and years doing, that's what they're doing. They're observing their own mind to gain mastery and to direct it from a higher, let's say, a higher plane or a higher state of awareness. That now becomes a very different proposition. You're not simply reacting to the environment, you're observing your mind react to the environment and then interceding and saying, I want to change that. I want to respond in a more creative way.
So would you say that anxiety is the experience of a loss of control?
Yes. From the subjective perspective
Mm.
of the individual.
The perception of the loss of control
Yeah.
is why we have anxiety.
Yeah. They have no control.
And
Uh,
that there's something that can harm them in some way. And when we talk about our, view of our own coaching method, we talk about the self from the Eastern perspective, the non-dual perspective, which is the soul cannot be harmed, cannot be damaged, cannot be hurt. And everything else is a transient experience, and who we really are is indestructible. And it's hard to just get intellectually. It takes practice to
yeah,
and reading and studying to understand the nature of who we are. And I think if we understand the nature of who we are now able to deal with life circumstances. So someone who is anxious all the time doesn't understand their true nature.
that's right. They're caught up in the immediate neurological response to external
Mm.
circumstances.
And you say the brain loves prediction. It's a prediction machine. So if you're relying on the brain to do everything, not your higher consciousness, you're kind of just operating on autopilot in a way. Your brain is looking for ways to minimize any surprises. And we're going to get to surprise in a little bit, but we don't like to be surprised. We like predictability.
Yes.
Like, we like having our paycheck every month. We just did some research, and, it turns out about only 10% of the population in the US are solopreneurs or entrepreneurs or small business owners or have their own kind of business. 90% of working people work for someone else. And why is that? Why do most of us work for someone else? Is because we don't like that some sense of control and predictability.
Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, you have less control when you work for somebody else because
Mhm.
you're not making the decisions, they are.
And how much you make and
Yeah.
what your work day looks like and how much vacation time you can take off. But it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know, and so many people it's just like with relationships, with people stay in marriages way too long because they think being single is going to be like a downgrade or something terrible is going to happen to them, moving to a new city, changing careers. There's this, the unknown is so scary, so this prediction machine in the brain it freaks out when it doesn't know, "Well, where's the next step? How do we do this?"
Yes.
And if you notice, we did a series on Hero's Journey about a month or 2 ago, and it really is true that crossing that threshold into the unknown and the hero has to face all these new dangers or new challenges that they didn't have to face in their home, in their safe comfort zone. And so if we wanna have great, great experiences in life, we have to kind of fall out of love with comfort and predictability and fall in love with anticipation and excitement of surprise.
Yes. The unknown. And yeah, something about anticipation, it kind of highlights or augments the experience. So that
Mm.
if we're anticipating pleasure, for example, the anticipation, right, like the song says, anticipation,
The ketchup bottle. They hated that when they did that.
heightens the experience. Like it makes it more delicious, more yummy,
Mm.
more interesting. But on the reverse side, when you're anticipating something bad, like going to the dentist and getting your wisdom teeth,
Getting test
medicine,
results. Yeah.
it also heightens that experience so that your mind starts becoming anxious and going through the worst case scenario kind of thing.
Well, I love this. The Dutch study showed that vacationers were happier before their trip than actually
Mhm.
during it, which I find it's true. We get excited about planning and going on this trip, and then we're on it, and then it's like, we're the first day, we have 3 days left. We gotta go back home, and then we start thinking about returning, anticipating the return versus anticipating, like, just enjoying each day. And again, anxiety is always misapplied because we're imaginative beings. We always think of these worst case scenarios that, if I stand up for myself and I tell this person how I feel, that they're going to be yelling at me and screaming and angry. And then you have that confrontation and it's not as bad. So things are never as worse as you expect or as great as you expect either.
Yeah, so the anxiety turns out to be the price we pay for this powerful imagination that we have.
Mm.
But, we're not going to give up the imagination because
Yeah.
it's powerful, especially once you start to recognize that you're not just your mind. You're observing your own mind, and that is part of what Jung called individuation, where you start to really call the shots for yourself instead of letting the external circumstances dictate to you. You start to really take control and drive the chariot of your mind.
Almost like stepping aside and not letting the machine run everything, and you're basically stepping outside and being outside of that.
Yeah.
Not getting rid of it, but being able to direct it.
Yeah, and
And
I
it
was
takes time. It's not like, "Oh, let me do a mindfulness and pay
right.
attention to the present moment, and that's going to do it." That those techniques help, but it's a process of getting them.
I know, but most of us have taken, let's say, a college course. If we put half the time and effort that we put into a course like that, we get a lot of results from it. Because the mind is malleable, it's
Mhm.
plastic, it's the neuroplasticity, meaning we can shape it, we can reshape it continuously, even into old age. So it's a powerful instrument, but it doesn't come with instructions. So it's like we were all handed these supercomputers, these quantum computers with no instruction. So most of us end up just playing tic-tac-toe on it or,
Some kind
video
of, like,
game.
Candy Crush or something
Yeah.
game. I don't even know if they still have that anymore.
Yeah. So always keep this in mind. You can retrain your mind. You can redesign it and have it work for you instead of kind of being at its mercy if you have anxiety.
And so anxiety and anticipation and control is all to really counter or avoid surprises. Surprises are fun. Some people love surprise parties. I like getting gifts when a surprise gift, but there's good surprises and then there's bad surprises like, oops, your test results came back or, you got laid off from your job or doing pay cuts. That thing you expected to check that you expected to arrive in the mail, we're taking that back. A bill that's wrong, right? We don't like those surprises. And so how do we deal with surprise in a way that
Yeah.
is positive and then want more surprises in life versus want that predictability?
Yeah. Well, especially as entrepreneurs, we had to learn how to deal with surprises. And one of the best ways to deal with a surprise is to always frame it as new possibilities,
Mm.
because that's what it is. Why we are the ones that are framing it as a disaster or a problem. We can simply say, "Oh, it opens up this new set of opportunities that I hadn't even thought about."
So what you're saying is reacting to when you're reacting to life, to see everything as an opportunity
Yeah,
will actually automatically diminish the level of anxiety you have because you're training yourself not to get depend on the control or that predictability and you're being open and you have more space to breathe in and especially as an entrepreneur. I mean, and relationships too. We want that excitement of that first, couple months of dating and what am I going to learn about this person and all those things. And then we want to that marriage and that commitment. And then everything becomes boring because there are no more surprises. You kind of know everyone. And I think the key to our relationship, we've been together almost 20 years now, is that we surprise each other all the time. We're always like reinventing ourselves and growing ourselves so that everything stays fresh. And that should be in everyone's life. We should always be bringing new things. Try even as simple as just learning a new skill or learning to cook or speaking a new language or constantly expanding and getting out of that comfort zone and doing something different in your life, taking risks. And, I remember when I got laid off from my corporate job, it was a surprise, but I knew I kind of planned like I've been wanting to leave for a while and it was a good surprise. It was still kind of scary. You don't know what to expect, but I knew that deep inside that this is the path I want to be on. So when you have this vision for your life and you know the long goal, the long-term purpose of your life, these little things that hiccups in life that show up, they don't seem so dramatic. Don't you think?
Absolutely. And again, reframing it as opportunity, as potential, as a creative venture that you're entering, instead of this is a big problem and it's going to ruin me, or defining it in a very kind of black and white way that it's either good or bad. We leave it open. Everything
Mhm.
is neutral. Everything is simply opportunity and complexity expressing itself. And our challenge, right? We take it as a challenge is to find the creative response that fits the situation. And we're good at it. Human beings, we're creative by nature. That is our unique skill, right? Just like birds fly, human beings are creative.
Mhm.
That's our go-to.
I remember when I first started being on my own outside of the corporate world, and I know a lot of our listeners are trying to live their purpose, going to be coaches or trainers or therapists or whatever they're doing or living their purpose in some way, creative way. I remember I used to say to myself every day I set an intention to have a wonderful surprise every day. And I remember telling you one morning, I think we had just met. It was like a month or 2 we were dating. And I said, "I'm expecting an incredible a surprise today." You came home and you brought me bouquet of flowers, and you're not like a flower guy all the time, so it was a surprise. And I said, "Oh, that's so beautiful that you did that." And you said you were expecting a surprise, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I think it's just creating that space for more surprises in your life really
Mhm.
keeps it positive. Little games I had to play to be in that uncomfortable place of the unpredictability of my life and everything that changes when you go for your dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the bottom line, the mind and the brain are malleable. And so it's up to you to take the reins of the mind instead of letting the external circumstances mold you and shape you and condition you. You start to make decisions about how you want to experience your life. And it's very doable again because we're designed for that, but you need some instruction, right? Some practice, some discipline, because the mind responds, but it requires practice, always practicing, right?
And
In a
also
certain way.
studying higher knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were having this discussion among some of the mentors that work with us. The question was like, what is the common denominator amongst people that take the reins of their mind? It's self inquiry, because self inquiry is the ability to question your own experience. You're not nullifying it or rejecting it. You're simply asking, what am I experiencing here? Where is this anger? Where is this surprise coming from? Where is this need for control? Where's this anxiety coming from? If you're able to do that, then you can work with your mind, right?
Mhm.
Because you're open to questioning instead of just simply buying into it automatic.
Would you say that also having no expectations would be a way to tamper anxiety as well?
Yeah, I mean that's
Because expectation is that kind of anticipation in a way.
right. That you want a certain outcome.
Mhm.
Yeah, mindfulness is kind of something like that, right? Or openness.
Mhm.
It's a personality trait, openness, and it means simply that you're open to new experiences. You're not judging them and either accepting them or rejecting them. You're open to exploring, well, what's going on here? Well, if I do tend to reject this, why am I rejecting this? And then you can start to see deeper layers of your experience.
So not only is the experience that shows up an opportunity, but also the anxiety is an opportunity because it's really showing us how we're so attached to something or where our mind is misperceiving reality.
And it can change people's lives. I mean, think of people that don't fly
Mhm.
because they're too anxious to fly. People that don't take positions where they're required to speak in public when they know it would be a good career move for them, but because of their anxiety, they decline those
Mm.
positions. On and on, right? People miss a lot of opportunities in their lives because of minor anxieties that they could easily transform with a little bit of practice.
I've even seen people not want to date
Yeah,
because they have the anxiety of getting heartbroken again. So they end up living like, and not everyone needs to be married, but the people that want it, but they feel like anxiety is too much, really holds them back. So a great way to work with that is some of these techniques, but one technique isn't going to do it all. Just doing mindfulness isn't going to do it. Just meditating is going to do it. It's sort of a behavior, examining your thoughts, the self inquiry, the understanding who you are as a being, spiritual understanding of who you are. And so all of that comes into play. But it's I have my family, there's a lot of anxiety, really harsh anxiety. My father had a lot of anxiety, and I feel like I handle it well because of these tools that we teach. So never no one is failed cause, like you can always change.
absolutely. If I can do it, anybody can.
Yes. All right. Well, now I'm not anxious about the episode anymore. It actually turned out to be surprise and surprise conversations.
And we
All right.
anticipate good things coming from it.
Yes. And so our next episode, it will be the last of the series, which is a juicy one coming up next week. We're going to end with peak experiences. So that's going to be amazing. So be sure to tune in next week for the finale of the emotional series. And listen to this. If you have anxiety, listen to this more than once. You're going to get some gems in here to help you really think about it in a different way.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Take care and we'll see you next week. Bye.